All right, I think let's get going. As I mentioned, we're recording today. So if anyone is a little bit late and misses anything, happy to send the link out later. My name is Kelsey Szamet. Many of you I know, some new names that I don't know. So I will be brief in my introduction. I am a lifelong Altadenan. We live on Brayburn Road and we are currently displaced, unknown status with cleaning, safety, some of the same things that many of you are dealing with. So I'm zooming in from my rental today. Grateful to have found a rental. And my background is in complex litigation. That's what I've done professionally my whole life. And a big part of what we are doing here is a educational series focused on providing information to the community. The goal here is to talk about all aspects of what we're going to be dealing with, from the cleaning process to dealing with insurance, which is a very hot topic right now, to what environmental testing looks like. We will have a specialist on bad faith law down the road. I'm working on lining up a FEMA specialist because we all have questions about that black box right now. So my featured guest, who I'm proud to introduce today, is Sydney Greenspan. I met her in person at a meeting a few weeks ago, but have known about her firm's reputation for a long time. They're, I can say, the most well-respected public adjusting firm in LA. I won't make Sydney say it, I'll say it on her behalf. It's a family of public adjusters, so she's third generation herself, which is incredible. And the goal here today is for her to just talk about the relationship and role of a public adjuster, what they can bring to the process that we're all going through. And she's going to speak for about 15-20 minutes to just cover the basics, provide an overview, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A for the last 5 or 10 minutes. That process we'll get to later, but if you have questions as we're going, please do feel free to drop them in the chat. And then when we go live on the Q&A, we can go through chat questions and also take raised hands. So Sydney, without further ado, please start us off.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be part of this webinar. The scale of devastation that we're dealing with the Eaton Fire and even Palisades fires is heartbreaking and unprecedented. And, if I can share a little bit of my knowledge on what this is something I deal with every day in my career, insurance claims. So if I can, give anyone some guidance and some knowledge to make this process a little bit easier on anyone, I'm happy to do so. So I'm going to start going through my presentation. It's five topics. So first, we're going to go into the types of coverages that you're going to find dealing with an insurance claim. Then we're going to start talking about the types of losses involved in a wildfire situation. Then we're going to start talking about the types of adjusters and some tips that I can give you going through the claims process, and then some rights as the policyholder and some mandates put out by the Department of Insurance, and then talk a little bit about when, having your own advocate might make sense. So I'm going to jump into it, and I've shared the PowerPoint on the screen so everyone can kind of take a look. Like Kelsey said, if you have any questions, just raise your hand. So let's jump into it. So my apologies, the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint, Kelsey? Okay. So first, we're going to just talk about some of the basic coverages found in an insurance policy. And this goes for a wildfire claim or a typical, standard one-off fire. So first, you have your dwelling coverage. Your dwelling coverage covers anything in the home as far as the walls, the roof, anything part of the structure. So you usually have your base limit, and then some policies offer something called an extended replacement cost. So this is additional money available outside of your base limit. It's usually either 25%, 50% of additional coverage. And then you go into your other structures coverage. So your other structures coverage is anything that is attached to the building, but not attached to the building, but on your property. So that can be a detached garage, sheds, fences, pools, anything on property that isn't part of the main dwelling. And then you have your personal property coverage. So your personal property coverage covers all of your personal belongings within your home. So if you were to take your home or your building and flip it upside down and shake it around a little bit, anything not connected to your structure is considered your personal property. And that is everything from mattresses to pillows to clothing, consumables, medication, anything, personal belongings in your home. And then you have your additional living expense coverage. So that coverage covers your housing, covers any additional increase in mileage if you're having to rent something that's farther outside of where your normal living is. It also covers meals, any overages in your normal everyday life. So there is an expectation from the insurance company that you still have to pay your normal everyday expenses, your mortgage, your property taxes, your normal food. If there's an increase to any of these things due to being displaced, that is what this coverage is for. It's to help you resume normal living wherever you are. And then we have our
Let
debris.
me ask a follow-up for standing structures. For someone in a rental situation, you're paying a power bill at 2 homes now. Should you seek recoupment of that second power bill, for example, associated with your rental?
100%. So if you are now paying utilities at 2 locations, they owe for the overage. So it would be the utilities at your temporary home. In some claims, if you're doing extensive mitigation efforts, or if you have a water claim, water damage claim, sometimes you do have increased utility bills. Even if you're not paying at 2 properties, you can always compare that to the prior year to show that there's an increase due to the event. So anything is covered if it's not a normal expense, if you didn't have this fire event or the water event, whatever the insurance claim is.
Another question I'm getting related to additional living expense. If you find a rental and you choose not to do furniture rental, for example, but end up purchasing some pieces of furniture, is that something you should seek reimbursement for because you had to buy the furniture to make your living situation comfortable?
So that's an interesting question, and it's a tricky answer because it would make sense to say yes, but they don't look at it that way. A lot of insurance companies, because in their mind, this is it. They're not paying you to replace an item, they're paying for the temporary use. So they'll pay for rental furniture, but if you say, hey, I had to go buy a new bed, usually there's a good amount of pushback because that would technically fall into the personal property category that you're replacing items. But if you're in a smoke claim and you're not necessarily replacing those items, that's where it gets very gray. Because of the extent of what we're dealing with, some insurance companies are allowing for things that wouldn't normally happen in a standard fire claim. But I would recommend asking for reimbursement. Let the insurance company tell you no, and just make your case that this was an essential emergency need, beds, clothing, anything like that. So, always submit something, let the insurance company come back and say no.
Thank you.
Of course. So then a few other little coverages or big coverages that matter. So debris removal. We'll get into the debris removal shortly. Landscaping coverage, which is plants, trees, shrubs, and ordinance and law. So ordinance and law coverage is an incurred coverage, and it is mandated by the building department when you go through the plans and permitting process. And it's anything that is required to bring your home or your dwelling up to code. So there is available coverage, and most of these coverages are percentage based off your base limit. So your base limit is your dwelling coverage, your coverage A. Something to be very mindful of, and something a lot of insureds are running into. A lot of times payments are being made for the full base limit of your coverage at your dwelling for repairs in a total loss situation. if you want to tap into the extra money, the extended replacement, the code, that money has to be incurred. So they won't pay it until you incur it, until you start doing the work. And that's where it gets really complicated, where, you know, you're going to hear me say, always measure from dollar one, because a lot of these coverages, there's certain triggers that provide coverage, but if you don't get to the trigger and you don't trigger the coverage, you know, you're only left with your base coverages. So just remember, extended replacement and code are not something that they're going to pay up front. That's something that gets paid, you know, later on in the claim. So those are your basic coverages. Now we're going to talk about, you know, just some general claims knowledge when it comes to wildfires versus standard homes. So first, we're going to talk about the scale of the damage. So when you're dealing with wildfire claims and you know, wildfires in general, we are dealing with entire communities that are, you know, being affected not only by a total loss, but also smoke claims. And, you know, the time it takes to now process these claims and the volume that the insurance companies are you know, getting these claims reported to them, it's something that we haven't experienced in a long time. And so right now it's still the triage mode. I know it feels like it's been a long time. You know, the fires started almost 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, but there is still this period of triage, which is what we're essentially dealing with right now due to the scale of the damage. Another thing you're going to hear a lot of people talking about is total losses versus partial and smoke claims. Total losses are usually nothing salvageable on the property. Maybe you have the remnants of what used to be, you know, a chimney. And now you're addressing the foundation, the hardscape, the dwelling, the other structures, everything on your property. Due to the volume of what we're dealing with, there's other, you know, downfalls that come with all of this, which is, you know, recovery timelines are definitely extended due to the amount of volume that every contractor is dealing with, every insurance company is dealing with, every mitigation company. And then you have your partial losses. So partial losses can be smoke claims, or it can be a part of your structure that is damaged by the fire. You know, and even in a lot of these smoke claims that we are seeing, we have a few of our clients that they've had to, you know, the method of repair that is being recommended is ripping, you know, the home down to the studs, which means there's very little of that home that's going to survive. So even if it's just a smoke claim, it can morph into a very extensive remediation, having to do a lot of construction in the home, not just a wipe down or, you know, some ozoning throughout the house. You know, unfortunately, smoke is dangerous. It's invisible and you can smell it sometimes, but you don't always see it. And you want to make sure that when you're dealing with a smoke claim, you're really understanding what's behind the walls, what's in the insulation, you know, what can't you see with the visible eye. You know, getting in insurance companies, I'm just going to be very honest, it's a struggle with smoke claims right now. That is why for us, we are recommending, you know, testing, getting environmental testing done. You know, it's really hard, and you deal with this a lot in water claims as well when you can't see the damage. When a house is burned, even if it's a partial burn, you can see the damage and you can chase it with your eyes. Smoke claims are very different, you know, and that's why there is a huge fight right now with a lot of the insureds on smoke claims with the carriers to try to get the insurance companies to step up and do the right thing. And a lot of that is based off the science. So we always recommend to, you know, me, especially to anybody I'm speaking with, even if the insurance company is not willing to pay for it, invest in your safety and get testing done, because that's going to drive the remediation by science and not by opinion.
What do you think the odds are, Sydney, if you come out of pocket pretty substantially for testing, just as you said, which I think many folks are, what are the odds that we can get reimbursed from our insurance down the road, in your opinion?
It really depends by carrier. So right now we've had a few carriers say yes, a few carriers say no. You know, California Fair Plan doesn't even want to, you know, entertain paying the invoices, but California Fair Plan has a very limited policy. And so when you really read the entire policy with California Fair Plan, there's different rules that you have to abide by. Chubb, AIG, Allstate, some of those carriers have no problem paying for testing. It also depends how close you were to a house that actually burned down. So are you within a couple houses, or are you half a mile or a mile away? That also, takes into consideration the insurance companies, yes or no when it comes to the testing. But environmental concerns are a big concern, because it's not just trees that are burning in wildfires. There are chemicals and cars and batteries and all these other things that we need to make sure we're being mindful of. I was at a house in the Palisades recently. It's a smoke claim. And when they went to do the testing, there's lead inside the entire home right now, and it traveled in the air. So environmental concerns, it's big right now. And what we want to make sure doesn't happen is that we don't get sick later down the line, because we're moving too fast or just trying to get home. Safety should always be at the forefront of any decision in this process that you're making.
Do you think that just lead and asbestos is sufficient, or would you personally recommend going further, doing VOCs, other types of metals, for example?
So the testing that I recommend to people is, and the testing that's going to drive the claim and the remediation is soot, char, ash. So that's really what they're looking for as far as the remediation. There are other testing you can do, more of the environmental concerns. And I've spoken to a few hygienists, and they've even said that doesn't necessarily change the remediation tactics. It's more of so you understand and have peace of mind when you're going home, what you're going home to. A lot of people right now, they're in a hurry to get home to do the remediation. And it can be problematic because, we have the Army Corps debris removal program that's happening right now, and that's kicking things into the environment, into the air. What I recommend to people is it's okay to slow play it a little bit and let the demo be done. Let them do what they need to do. Let the insurance companies triage and get back to you when they can, because it kind of buys you a little more time before you want to go home. It's not always a race to the finish line. It's doing it the right way, which sometimes means being patient and slow playing the process. But it's always the best. Yeah. Debris removal is another thing. So there is the Army Corps of Engineer that is offering debris removal. Unfortunately for the debris removal program, unless your house is a total loss, they won't assist with the debris removal efforts. So now we're kind of dealing with extra added elements of, now we have some mudslide issues with some, insureds in those areas. So there is a problem with that. So I had an insured who has extensive amount of mud flow in their backyard, but because of the fact that the home is still standing, they have no help from the Army Corps. They pretty much told them, your house is standing, this is not the program for you. So now they have to then figure out, okay, who's going to help me with this, with the mud flow. Just remember, anything related to any mud flow due to the rains, if you are a victim of the Eaton Fire or the Palisades fire, the proximate cause is the fire. So if there is mud flow, if there is secondary damage due to these, other events, it's not a separate claim. It is strictly still part of the fire, smoke, partial, whatever claim you have going on right now. We talked a little bit about additional living expenses. We're kind of a little far out from the event now, but this was a big topic at the beginning just due to the shortage in the areas. It seems like people are starting to get a little more settled out there, which is good. And, something that we've never seen before is in our world and public adjusters is the way that, people stepped in to try to minimize the amount of fraudsters out there trying to make sure that they weren't going to inflate pricing for housing and things like that. That has been such a big issue in prior wildfires that it is a great thing to see that they're actually doing something about it now, and really trying to hold those people accountable that are inflating housing prices and things like that. So my hope is that they're going to continue this throughout this whole process, because next challenge is shortages and inflation on materials and wood and things like that. So we love that. We love that they're stepping in for that. And market demand surge. We've talked about this, but due to the volume of everything, there's going to be a lot of shortages going going on and a lot of inflation. And, like I said, I hope that they can just figure out how to minimize that, because everybody should be, very, very mindful that there are a lot of fraudsters and a lot of people taking advantage of the situation that we're in the Los Angeles area. It's inevitable, and people are going to do it, but just be very mindful that, you're vetting people you're dealing with, and so forth. So we are going to jump into a little bit of the adjusting team, and give you kind of some tips on how you can help navigate this. So if you have an insurance claim, you have two main adjusters that work on behalf of the insurance company or directly for the insurance company. So you have your carrier adjusters, who work directly for the insurance company, State Farm, Allstate, whoever it is. And then you have your independent adjuster, and these two adjusters, people get very confused between an in-house adjuster and an independent adjuster. An independent adjuster does not work for the insurance company. They're a third-party vendor, and they're hired to essentially be the eyes and the ears in the field. They have no authority. They cannot make coverage decisions. They can't write checks. They're literally there to estimate the damages, write a scope of repairs, and report back to the insurance company. One of the things, the biggest tip I can give anybody dealing with these catastrophe adjusters, independent adjusters, what we're seeing right now is the first shift of adjusters. If you're dealing with an adjuster now, chances are that's not going to be your same adjuster at the end of this. Make sure every single communication, every phone call, every in-person meeting is documented in writing, emailed over to the carrier, and just memorialize any agreements, anything that you guys discussed and talked about. I had an insured call me yesterday and said, hey, my first adjuster agreed to these 5 things, and now the next adjuster is telling me, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not documented in the claim file. That's because the adjuster don't think that they're going to go back to the computer and start writing notes of the things that they've said yes to. It is your job as the policyholder to make sure that you're documenting everything, because later on in the claim, when you're having to claim detrimental reliance because, Jackie O from the original adjuster said yes, you now have proof in writing showing this is exactly what we agreed on. If you don't have it in writing, it didn't exist essentially in a claim file. And then you have public adjusters, which is what I am. So public adjusters and attorneys are the only, people allowed to handle insurance claims on behalf of an insured in the state of California. So public adjusters, we are advocates for the policyholders. So we step into your shoes dealing in an insurance claim, and we help measure the damages, coordinate the vendors, communicate directly with the insurance company on your behalf, come to an agreed settlement that you as the insured has the final say on. So we are there to essentially handle the claim on your behalf, but let you get back to your everyday life and not have to spend all day every day dealing with your insurance claim. We are also highly regulated through the Department of Insurance. Another tip, there are a ton of public adjusters, within California, but also this, the country, and a lot are on their way out to California. California insurance is its own ball game. We are very different the way that, we handle claims and what the Department of Insurance has mandated us to do. So always make sure any public adjuster that you're interviewing, you're talking to, make sure you're vetting them, make sure they understand California claims. You can check the NAPIA website, the National Association of Public Insurance Adjusters. We consider that the gold standard of public adjusters, public adjusting associations. Make sure you're checking license numbers on the Department of Insurance. And do your homework. And this goes for any vendor, any public adjuster, anybody that you're hiring to come and help you with your insurance claim. Okay, and another tip, and this gets brought up all the time, when you start getting money for your repairs, your mortgage company is going to be listed on the payments, and so they have a interest in your property and in the repairs. So make sure that as soon as you start getting these multi-party checks, so if you have Chase as your mortgage company, Chase is going to be listed, make sure you're letting your lender know, hey, I had an insurance claim. I'm going to be sending in a check. You're going to need to open a loss draft account. There is no way around having them listed on the check. The only way to get your mortgage company off your recovery funds is to pay off your mortgage, which, some people can, some people can't. But it's a big topic, because when people start getting their insurance payments, they're very confused why their lender is on the check. It's a requirement. So the next part of the slide, I was going to go into some mandates. I know we're running low on time.
I think this has been super helpful, and I'm sure that folks have some questions that we can field. But I think the main question that I am fielding right now, Sydney, is a lot of frustration now that we're 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out with insurance companies. And is it time to hire a public adjuster? Should I wait and let things play out a little bit more? You mentioned, from your perspective, the insurance companies are still in triage mode and probably just wrapping their heads around this and processing it, which obviously I can understand as an intelligent person, but as someone displaced myself and feeling like I'm fighting with State Farm tooth and nail, it's hard for me to have a lot of grace for State Farm. But when is the time to really think about a public adjuster? And I think public adjusters are probably inundated with claims. There are so many thousands of total losses. I would imagine the Greenspan company can't take on all of these thousands of clients and give them the service that you want to give. So my questions are, what is the timing to really think about hiring a public adjuster? If Greenspan, who's wonderful, doesn't have capacity, what would you recommend instead in terms of a resource? And then, third is, our smoke claims, in your view, is a smoke claim a claim that is ripe for a public adjuster to help them?
So, hiring a public adjuster in a normal standard, one-off fire, I always recommend from day one, because that's how you really keep control of your claim. You can kind of guide the ship. We are dealing with very different uncharted territories. So as far as hiring a public adjuster, you would normally, what I'm telling people right now is go do your initial inspections with your insurance company, see where they're at right now, see what your delta is, and then come and talk to me again, and we can kind of go through the facts, because every claim is very specific to the facts of your own claim. So right now we're getting a lot of people reaching out saying, hey, my adjuster isn't responding, they're not answering, they're not giving me answers. That is very typical, and it's not just for you as a policyholder, it's for us as public adjusters as well. We have our 20 adjusters calling these adjusters day and night, trying to get a hold of them on the carrier side from our side. Right now, the biggest problem is that insurance companies are offering really big checks to people, and that's a beautiful thing to see. But how do you tap into the rest of the money available in your policy, all the extra bells and whistles? That is what you, as a policyholder who's never dealt with this, is going to have a hard time doing. When you have a total loss and you've gotten your base limits paid out, you still have to go back and measure from $1 and prove the damages from $1 all the way to the last dollar available under your policy. That is where public adjusters really help, not only access all these extra buckets of money, but help measure out the claim and present it to the insurance company in a way that they understand the data we're providing to them to come to an agreed settlement. So hiring a public adjuster, some people hire us because they just don't have the bandwidth in their life to deal with an insurance claim, because it truly is a full-time job. You can't just jump in and out of the claims process. You're constantly managing it. And as far as public adjusters and smoke claims, so for us as a company right now, due to the volume that we received of people reaching out, we are trying to help people in a total loss situation, because that is the more complicated and the longer term process, because we are in it with you until you move home and your home is rebuilt and the last personal property replacement receipt is submitted. So that's why I say be wary. Smoke claims right now are challenging for everybody, not just you. Public adjusters have issues. Attorneys have issues with smoke claims. it's very, very early. And so right now we're still trying to see what the insurance companies are doing. Myself personally, I'm always happy to be a guide, a resource. You know, I'm fielding calls daily of just people I'm giving advice to, and I'm telling, I don't think you need a public adjuster. I just think you need a good team of vendors behind you, which can help this in some of the same ways: testing, contents, remediation. So, you know, the big and the short answer is it just depends on the situation, but always feel free to reach out to a public adjuster, especially when you have specific questions to your claim.
Okay, that's really helpful. Another issue that I'm hearing and actually dealing
Kelsey,
with first.
sorry, I just
Yeah,
want to let you know, I've sent you a couple messages. We have some questions that have come in.
thank you.
Of course.
Another issue which addresses one of these questions is something that we're dealing with personally, where your insurance company has a preferred vendor such as ServPro, brings them out, and then ServPro sends the remediation report directly to State Farm. I am hearing many people say the carrier is refusing to provide the report. So is there a right to fight that and say, you must give me the report so I can even understand the scope of work?
Yeah, you can request your claim file at any time and they have to provide it to you in writing. Part of your claim file is any estimate. So part of the problem with using the preferred vendor is that you lose control of your claim. When you're using State Farm's preferred vendor and that vendor is sending the estimate directly to State Farm, you have no idea what you're paying. You don't have to use State Farm's preferred vendor or the carrier's preferred vendor. You, as the policy holder, have the right to choose whatever vendor you want. If you're going to go with a carrier vendor, I would always recommend letting them know up front, I'm happy to go with you, but I want you to be very transparent with any invoicing that goes to the carrier. The other side of this is, as the work is being done, that same vendor is going to start supplementing the work for more money, saying, oh, I found more damage in when I opened up the walls, or whatever the case is. That's where you, again, lose control, because those supplements are going straight to the insurance company. So we always recommend try to find a team that is going to remember that you, as a policyholder, it's your best interests that matter. That is how you control your own claim and really control the dollars that are being spent under your insurance policy.
What about a follow-up question that I'm hearing a lot of? Allstate says, well, we got a $77,000 bid from ServPro. Either A, we think it's too high and we're going to reduce it, which is mind-blowing to me, or B, we're only going to approve 77,000, regardless of whether the policyholder went out and got a bid with someone they feel more comfortable with that was higher. What do you do in that situation?
So, I mean, I always recommend to have your own bid, and that's the normal process of insurance, even for public adjusters. The carrier has their bid, we have ours. Usually they're like this, and you try to match it in the middle and close the delta. The bigger problems are, when California Fair Plan is saying, we can't see the smoke, so we're not paying for it, or we're not doing O-zoning. When they're completely denying full, things, remediation tactics that need to be done, that's where you have a bigger problem. But that is where the fight comes in. That's where us as public adjusters, that's really what we're doing. We're negotiating the gap down to come to an agreed settlement that the vendor is happy, the insured's happy, and there's enough money to actually do the remediation. The main concern here is extracting all of the smoke damage, the smells. So in the summer when it's hot, it's not smelling like a campfire in your house again, because that's really when you're going to notice if there's still damage in your house, when everything's cleaned up and it gets 90 to 100 degrees outside. That's the big concern.
Mm-hmm. I think that I know there are some folks on this call with smoke damage and also some full losses. So I don't want smoke damage to dominate the conversation. But what is happening on the ground is exactly what we're talking about. The insurance companies are really starting to push back and put pressure on insureds. And there's a lot of frustration and desire and demand for people to say, I just think I need help at this point. They're being totally unreasonable with me. So I hope that there's a way that, there's enough legitimate NAPIA public adjusters out there that are willing to take on these claims in good faith and really help people, because I think it's happening sooner than any of us even thought we would start to get this degree of pushback.
The pushback is pretty normal, to be honest. I think smoke claims, even after the Wolseley fire, with the amount of smoke claims they had, there was a lot of carriers talking about putting limitations in policies the same way you have limitations for mold and certain things in your policy. Smoke claims have always been a really tough thing, and there's always a lot of pushback, but that's why we always recommend that you need your team. You don't want to just use the carrier's vendor. You want a vendor who's going to come and not only provide an estimate, but also show up to the meeting with you, the on-site inspection, and help negotiate their own invoices, knowing that they're the ones doing the work. So there are some situations where you don't necessarily need a public adjuster. Maybe you just need a good vendor who can back up their estimate and help fight the fight for you. Once you do that practice and it doesn't work, that is when you need to reach out to a public adjuster. And even before that, even before your initial inspection, I have people call me all the time and I'll tell them, okay, here are some vendors, here's your roadmap. Go meet with the adjuster, see how big the delta is, and then call me back and we're going to talk this through. And, there's going to have to be a big push as far as lawsuits and things with some of these insurance companies before there's a big change in what they're agreeing to, because right now there's just a lot of denials and no's, but eventually they're going to have to change their tune around here. And that might be the Department of Insurance getting involved. We don't really know. But yeah, smoke claims are always been a problem even before this event.
Okay, I have an audience question. It's a great question, and it applies to any type of loss. As you mentioned, some people are starting to see checks. How do you protect yourself and make sure that the company doesn't view it as a final payment or a full payment, that you're not releasing rights to come back and say, hey, I'm entitled to further, buckets in the future, or I'm entitled to further cleaning in the future if I think I need it? What is the language that you need to use to protect yourself?
So unless they're sending you a check with an agreement, you would know. So if they're asking you to sign like a final, agreement, there would be documents that they would put in front of you that says this is a full and final. As long as they're so right now, what people are mainly getting are advance payments, and it's an advance, a good faith in advance with no work product behind it. It's just saying, we believe that your house is going to be in excess of maybe 250,000 for the contents and your base limit for the dwelling. Unless they're having you sign a release, that would be the only way that you bar yourself from getting future money. And you would know it because they have to present it to you. You have to sign it, sometimes notarize it. And nobody should really be seeing that right now. That would come, way later down the line, maybe a year or two from now.
And would it be helpful, as you said, to send follow-up emails recognizing the payment and saying, I don't view this as full payment in any way. This is a partial payment to get work underway. We will continue the discussion so that you're documenting that on your own behalf.
Yeah, you can even put on your email, I reserve the right to amend, supplement, modify any submission later. We always put that, like, our insureds reserve their rights, to really, when you're saying amend, modify, supplement the claim at a later date, that is really, you're leaving the door open for, hey, I'm going to be providing additional work product to you, and you're going to have to consider it later for payment.
Okay, that's a really helpful practical tip.
Mm-hmm.
I think I hit all of the audience questions that were put in the chat, but if I missed yours and you feel like you have a burning question, raise your hand and I will get to you. It's possible I missed something posted.
Let's see. I'm looking at them too. I think we got to them all. But if I can just give everybody one more tip, it's slow down, go through the process. I know it can be so frustrating right now, especially with adjusters not answering their phone, not providing guidance. And, we look to our insurance adjusters and we pay our premiums on time every month. And a lot of people have this expectation of what an insurance claim is like. And then they step into this world and it's really different. It's okay right now to not race to the finish line. Give yourself a chance to concentrate on your normal life and getting it back to as normal as you can in these crazy times. This really is, it's a marathon. It's a long-term process, not just for, you know, the individuals affected, but also for the community. And, you know, like I said before, this is still triage time. It's going to get better, but it's going to take time. You know, which is really important. And, you know, just if questions, concerns, anything like that, you know, insurance companies aren't great about giving you that hand holding and really explaining things to you. Public adjusters, you know, advocates out there, United Policyholders is a really great, you know, policyholder advocacy association. You know, there are resources for you guys out there, myself as well. You know, if anybody has specific questions to their claim, Kelsey, amazing, and her team, you know, so as a community, I see the rebuilding in the future. Altadena is a very amazing community, and you know, just getting to be involved in this and seeing how you guys come together as a community, it's amazing. And so, you know, support each other, and you know, that's what we can do to rebuild together.
Sydney, thank you so much. I was so impressed when I met you, and today equally, it's been so helpful. I think the practical advice is so important as we're trying to navigate this. And like you said, taking care of one another, sharing resources on the ground, tips, tricks. This worked for me to get my hygienist testing covered. This worked for me to get a 12-month lease approved. That has been so powerful. So we really appreciate your time. I know that you make yourself available to help people. And I knew Sydney was the real deal when she said, I spend half my time telling people, you don't need a public adjuster yet. Like, you don't need to be bringing someone in yet. Maybe you will in the future, but you know, it's hard because we all want some certainty and some answers. And sitting in this uncomfortableness is really hard. But we really appreciate your time, and we will share your contact information for people to reach out. As we said, we'll share the recording today to share with people if you think it would be helpful with anyone. And I hope you'll continue to join our educational webinar series and meet other subject matter experts like Sydney, who will just help us through this process and helps answer some of the questions that our claims adjusters and public officials are not answering for us right now. So thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye, everyone.